It was the day I realized I was nothing more than a shadow in his life that changed everything. I had always known, deep down, that I wasn't his priority. I'd seen the signs, the late nights at work, the endless phone calls, the excuses. But I told myself that it was just a phase, that things would get better, that my love would be enough to fix everything. It's a dangerous thing, love, when you allow it to make excuses for everything that hurts you. And it's even more dangerous when you let it silence the voice inside you, telling you to stop, telling you that you're worth more than what you're getting. When I found out the truth, I wasn't surprised. I had been waiting for it, in the back of my mind, even though I tried so hard to ignore the whispers. He betrayed me, not once, but again and again, with no regret, no remorse. He was a master at pretending, at making everything seem like it was fine when the cracks were already starting to show. But I was too deep in my own denial to see it. I was blinded by the belief that love could conquer everything. I was wrong. The day I found out wasn't dramatic. There were no loud arguments, no dramatic confrontations. It was quiet. It was the kind of betrayal that seeps in, slow and steady, until you realize that you've been drowning all along. He had cheated on me. Not with a person I could easily dismiss. No, it was with someone who had been there from the beginning. Emily. Someone I had welcomed into my life with open arms, thinking she was a friend, someone who shared my dreams. But she had always been there, lurking in the background, waiting for the moment when I would no longer be enough. The betrayal stung, but it was more than just the act itself. It was the realization that I had built my life around someone who didn't care about me the way I cared about him. That everything I had sacrificed, all the dreams I had put on hold for his, meant nothing to him. He hadn't just betrayed me in that moment. He had betrayed everything we had built together. The trust, the love, the future I had envisioned. And it wasn't just him. It was me too. I had let myself be lost in the shadows of his life, so consumed by the idea of making him happy that I forgot to make myself happy. I had let myself fade into the background, waiting for the day when he would finally notice me again, when he would see me as more than just a supporting character in his story. But that day never came, and it never would. The pain was excruciating, but as I sat in that empty apartment, surrounded by the silence of everything I had lost, something in me shifted. It was like a switch had been flipped, and I realized that I had been waiting for someone else to save me for too long. I had been waiting for him to choose me, to put me first, to show me the love I deserved. But that was never going to happen. The truth was, I had to save myself. I had spent too many years living for someone else. Too many years trying to be what he needed, what Emily needed, what the world expected from me. But in the end, I was left with nothing. No love, no validation, no future. But I realized then that the one thing I had always had, the one thing no one could take away from me, was my own power. I didn't need him. I didn't need Emily. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was worthy. I had been enough all along. The mistake I had made was in thinking that my worth was determined by someone else's actions, someone else's approval. But that was the last time I would make that mistake. This was my moment of rebirth. I wasn't going to wait for him to choose me anymore. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to tell me I was worth it. I was going to show myself, and the world, that I could stand on my own. That I could build a life that was all mine, free from the manipulation and deceit that had defined my past. I had been betrayed without regret, but I would not let that define me. I would take the pain, the anger, the heartbreak, and I would use it to fuel my transformation. This was the beginning of a new life, one where I would no longer be a supporting character. I would be the star of my own story, and nothing, no one, was going to stand in my way. I thought love was supposed to save us. It was supposed to bind us together, to make us stronger, to protect us from the harsh realities of the world. I gave Ethan everything I had, my heart, my time, my trust, thinking that it was enough. I believed that if I was just there for him, if I supported him enough, he would love me the way I loved him. But it wasn't enough. It never was. The first time I noticed the distance between us was small, almost imperceptible. He would come home later and later, his face tired, his mind elsewhere. He told me it was work, that he had to stay late, that the promotion he had been working for was almost within his reach. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I had always believed in us. I had always thought that as long as we were together, everything would work out. But there were moments too when I felt the unease creeping in. He was always too busy for me. The phone calls, the emails, the meetings. His work became a constant in our lives, and I became a mere background. I tried to be understanding. I tried to tell myself that it was for the best, for our future. But I felt the void growing, slowly but surely. And even when we did spend time together, I could sense that he wasn't fully there, his mind preoccupied with something or someone else. I remember the first time I confronted him. I had finally had enough of the excuses, the coldness. I asked him, "Is there someone else?" He had laughed it off, brushing it aside as if it was a joke, as if I was just being paranoid. I wanted to believe him, so I did. But in my gut, I knew something was wrong. He wasn't just busy with work. He was avoiding me, avoiding the truth. Then came the moment that shattered everything. I found the messages. They were innocently tucked away in his phone, hidden behind a password that was never there before. I wasn't the type to snoop, but the feeling that something was off was so overwhelming that I couldn't ignore it anymore. And when I saw her name, Emily, I felt my world crumble. The messages weren't just casual chats. They were intimate. They were personal. They were filled with promises that he had never made to me, not the way he did with her. The text spoke of a connection, an affection that I had never once seen between us. I confronted him, heart pounding in my chest, trembling with a fear I had never felt before. He denied it, of course. He apologized. He said she meant nothing, that it was just a mistake, a slip-up. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to. But I could see it in his eyes. The guilt, the avoidance, the way he couldn't even look at me without shifting uncomfortably. I wasn't stupid. He had betrayed me. And that was when I realized how much I had been blinded by my own love for him. I had given him everything. My loyalty, my time, my self-respect. And he had taken it all without a second thought. I had been so focused on supporting him, on being the perfect partner, that I had forgotten to care for myself. I had abandoned my own dreams, my own desires, in the name of love, believing that my sacrifice would somehow bring us closer. But instead, it only pushed us further apart. I remember the night he finally admitted it. I had found more evidence, more messages, more lies. I had cornered him, and his face, filled with regret and shame, was the last thing I saw before the dam broke. He told me everything. He confessed his feelings for Emily, how he had lied to me for months, how he had been seeing her behind my back. And all I could do was sit there, numb. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to throw everything I had at him. But I didn't. I just cried. And in that moment, I realized something else. I had given up everything for him. My life, my time, my happiness. And he had taken it without hesitation. I had been nothing but a stepping stone, a comfort when he needed it, a convenience in his life. I wasn't his partner. I wasn't his equal. I was a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The next few weeks were a blur of emotions. I was angry, devastated, lost. The man I thought I knew, the man I thought I loved, had shattered me in ways I couldn't even comprehend. I tried to leave, but I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to walk away. He promised he would change. He said he was sorry, that he would do whatever it took to fix things. And, for a while, I believed him. But as the days passed, the wounds began to fester. I couldn't look at him without seeing the lies. I couldn't touch him without remembering what he had done. And slowly, I began to realize that I wasn't the same person anymore. The woman who had once been so full of love and trust had become someone unrecognizable. The person I was, someone willing to forgive betrayal, willing to sacrifice everything for a man who couldn't even be loyal, was a person I could no longer be. That was the moment I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that everything could be fixed with a few empty promises. I had to choose me. I had to choose my own happiness. I had spent too long being the person he needed, the person Emily needed, the person the world expected me to be. But the woman I needed to be was someone who could stand on her own, someone who could walk away from the lies, someone who could let go and move forward. And that was when I decided to let go. I decided to stop waiting for him to change, for him to fix things. I realized that I couldn't control his actions, but I could control mine. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change how I responded. It was time to move on. Time to stop living for someone else's approval. Time to start living for me. And so, I began the hardest journey of my life, the journey of reclaiming myself. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be painless, but it was the only choice I had left. I wasn't going to let him define me anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone define me. I was going to find my strength, my independence, my freedom. I was going to find myself again. I woke up that morning knowing something had changed inside of me. The world outside still looked the same. Gray skies, the same traffic buzzing outside my window. But I no longer felt like I was part of it. I was someone different now. Someone who had learned the painful truth and had decided to rise from the ashes. I wasn't going to let the past define me. I wasn't going to spend another day being someone else's shadow. I realized then that this wasn't just about Ethan or Emily. This was about me. I had allowed myself to be defined by the roles I had played for them. The supportive girlfriend, the one who stayed behind, the one who sacrificed everything for someone else's dreams. And I had done it all out of love. But what had love ever given me in return? Heartbreak, betrayal, loneliness. But I wasn't going to stay in that place anymore. I was done waiting for someone else to validate me, to tell me I was worth something. I knew now that I was the only one who could do that for myself. And so, I made a decision. I was going to take control of my own life. I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate my happiness anymore. The first step was to create a life that was mine, a life where I didn't need anyone else to define me. The first thing I did was confront the fear that had held me back for so long, the fear of being alone. I had been terrified of solitude for years. I had convinced myself that being alone meant being unworthy, that if I wasn't with someone, if I didn't have someone by my side, I wasn't enough. I had spent so much of my life relying on others for approval, for validation, that I had forgotten how to be alone with myself. So, I took a step into the unknown. I moved out of the apartment we had shared, the one that held all the memories of our life together. The memories of our love, those words we had whispered to each other, those promises we had made. It was painful to leave, but I knew I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I couldn't keep living in a place that reminded me of everything I had lost. The first few nights in my new apartment were difficult. The silence was deafening, and I often found myself lost in thought, wondering if I had made the right choice. But then I realized something. The silence wasn't empty. It was space. It was space to breathe, to think, to finally be free. It was space to grow. I wasn't alone. I was learning to be myself again. And that, in itself, was a victory. The next step was about rebuilding. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had given up until I started looking at my life from the outside. My career had been put on the back burner for so long. I had focused on Ethan's dreams, his ambitions, his goals, while mine had fallen to the wayside. I had put everything into him, thinking that our future would be shared, that his success would be my success. But I was wrong. I was still here, alone, and now it was time for me to take back what I had abandoned. I took a long, hard look at my skills, my passions, and my interests. It wasn't about building something for someone else. It wasn't about getting a job that made someone else proud. It was about finding something I could be proud of, something that was truly mine. I started researching, applying for jobs, and networking with people who shared my values. I wasn't looking for a handout. I wasn't looking for someone to offer me a position out of pity or sympathy. I was looking for an opportunity to prove to myself that I could do this, that I could succeed on my own. It wasn't easy. The rejection letters piled up at first, and I began to feel that old, familiar sense of doubt creeping in. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I was being foolish to think I could start over, to think I could achieve something on my own. But every time that doubt reared its head, I reminded myself of how far I had already come. I had survived the worst betrayal of my life. I had walked away from a toxic relationship, and now I was walking toward something better. I wasn't going to give up now. And then, finally, I got the call. The company I had interviewed with had decided to offer me a position. I was ecstatic, but at the same time, I felt a deep sense of pride. This wasn't just about getting a job. It was about proving to myself that I had what it took to succeed. I had faced rejection, I had faced heartbreak, but I had kept moving forward. This job wasn't just a job. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for. It was a step toward building the future I had always wanted, one where I wasn't defined by anyone else's expectations. Alongside my career, I also began to rebuild my personal life. I started focusing on the things that made me happy, the things I had neglected for so long. I took up painting again, something I had loved as a child but had abandoned over the years. I started exercising, not to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel strong, because I wanted to feel in control of my own body. I spent time with friends who had always supported me, who never judged me, who saw me for who I was, not who I pretended to be. Every step I took brought me closer to the woman I was meant to be. And with every decision I made, I felt stronger, more empowered. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was reinventing it. I was taking the lessons from my past and using them to create something new, something better. But the most important change was the shift in how I saw myself. I had spent so much time relying on others for validation, for approval. I had spent so much time trying to live up to the expectations of others, of being the perfect girlfriend, the perfect partner. But I had forgotten the most important lesson of all. I didn't need anyone's approval but my own. I didn't need Ethan. I didn't need Emily. I didn't need anyone who couldn't see my worth. The woman I had become was worthy on her own. The woman I was becoming was unstoppable. I was done waiting for someone else to define me. I was done letting my past dictate my future. I was ready to take control of my own life, to live for myself, to live without apology. This was my time, and I was going to make the most of it. It's easy to believe that walking away from a toxic relationship will solve everything, that once you take that first step, You'll be free, unhindered, moving toward the life you deserve. But the truth is, breaking free is just the beginning. The real battle comes after you've made the decision, when the weight of your past continues to haunt you, and the people who once held sway over you refuse to let go. The hardest part isn't walking away, it's staying away. In the weeks following my decision to leave, Ethan tried to reach out, again and again. His messages began with apologies, soft, pleading words that echoed the same promises he had made in the past. He told me he was sorry, that he had made a mistake, that he was willing to do anything to fix things between us. Each message was like a punch to my gut, a reminder of how deeply he had hurt me. But with each one, I grew stronger. I was done being his safety net, his second choice. I wasn't going to let his empty words pull me back into a life I had outgrown. The first time I saw him after leaving was the hardest. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation. It was a casual encounter on the street. I was walking to my car when I saw him standing there, waiting for me, his face anxious, his posture tense. When our eyes met, he didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, his expression a mixture of regret and something else. Something like fear. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I could hear the desperation in it, the need for my forgiveness, the hope that I might still be the person I had been before. I stood there for a moment, frozen. For a second, I thought maybe I'd fall into old habits, that I'd listen to his words, let him convince me that things could be different, that he would change. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. I remembered what he had done. I remembered how many times I had forgiven him, how many times I had put his needs before mine, how many times I had let his mistakes slide because I was afraid of being alone. And I realized I wasn't that person anymore. "No," I said firmly, the words sharp and clear. "I'm done talking. I'm done forgiving. You don't get to keep coming back into my life like this. I'm done." His face fell, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced with frustration. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I messed up. But I love you. I always have. I'm willing to change. You know I can. Just give me a chance." I shook my head, my chest tight. "You don't love me, Ethan. You love the idea of me. You love having someone to fall back on, someone who will be there when it's convenient for you. But I'm not that person anymore. You don't get to rewrite history. You've had your chance. And you blew it." He opened his mouth to argue, but I turned and walked away before he could say anything else. I didn't look back. I didn't need to hear his excuses. The person who stood there, watching him beg for forgiveness, was not the woman I had been when I was with him. She had died the moment I walked away from that relationship. I had shed that version of myself. But that wasn't the end of it. Ethan wasn't going to let go that easily. It wasn't just him, it was Emily too. I had hoped that once I walked away from him, I'd be free of her as well, but I was wrong. The truth was, I had underestimated her. She wasn't just going to disappear into the background of our story. I was sitting at my desk one afternoon when I received the first message from her. The tone was cold, calculated, and it made my skin crawl. She claimed that she wanted to clear the air to explain her side of the story, that she had never meant to hurt me. At first, I didn't even know how to respond. Why did she think she had any right to talk to me after everything that had happened? She was the one who had helped destroy my life, who had been complicit in the betrayal. But something inside me told me to listen, to not give in to the anger that threatened to consume me. The next day, I met her. It wasn't for closure, as she had hoped. It wasn't to apologize or to try to make amends. It was to stand my ground, to show her that I wasn't the person I used to be. She met me at a coffee shop, sitting at a corner table, her posture as confident as ever. The moment I walked in, her eyes met mine, and I could see the familiar look of superiority in them. She thought she had won. She thought she had taken my place. "Good to see you," she said, her voice almost sickly sweet. But there was an edge to it, something that made me feel uneasy. "I've been meaning to talk to you. You know, I don't think it's fair that you walked away without hearing my side." I sat down across from her, my hands clenched in my lap. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. "You don't get to rewrite this story," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You don't get to pretend that you didn't play a part in all of this. I don't need to hear your excuses. I don't need your apology. What happened between us? It's over. And I've moved on." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of anger in her gaze. But then she smirked, as though she had been waiting for me to say something like that. "You really think you've won, don't you? You think you can just walk away and forget about everything? About him? About me? You'll regret it. You'll regret leaving him." "I don't need him," I replied coldly. "I never needed him. I only needed myself. And I've finally found her again." I stood up and walked out of that coffee shop with my head held high, not because I had won the conversation, but because I had won the war. She wasn't my enemy. She was just a reminder of a life I had left behind, a life that no longer had any power over me. I wasn't the woman who had been manipulated, who had been broken by betrayal. I wasn't the woman who had allowed herself to be used. I was someone new now, someone who was unafraid, someone who had learned the value of standing alone and standing strong. Ethan and Emily's attempt to pull me back into their world was their last effort. They didn't realize it yet, but they had already lost. The moment I let go of them was the moment I became unstoppable. And nothing, no matter how much they tried to manipulate or guilt me, would ever take that away. The moment I walked away from Ethan and Emily, I knew that I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, but there was still so much to do, so much to prove to myself. I had spent years living in the shadows of others, afraid to take the leap into the unknown. But I had learned something valuable during the darkness of the past few months. I was capable of so much more than I had ever given myself credit for. And now, it was time to embrace that power fully. It wasn't easy. Every day brought its own challenges. The world wasn't going to hand me success just because I had decided to take control. I knew that. But each day that I woke up and chose to push forward, to work hard for my own success, I felt stronger. I felt more confident. I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was always meant to be. The first major breakthrough came when I secured a job at a prestigious company, a place that I had once thought was out of my reach. I remember sitting in that first interview, my palms sweating, my heart pounding, wondering if I had what it took to be in the room with these successful, driven individuals. But as the conversation went on, as I spoke about my skills, my passion, my desire to build something for myself, I could see the shift in their eyes. I wasn't just another applicant. I was someone who was ready to take on the world. When I received the offer letter, I was overjoyed, but there was something more, something deeper. It wasn't just about the job itself. It was about the recognition of my own worth. For so long, I had been defined by my relationship with Ethan, by my role as his partner, his support system. But now I was defined by my own achievements. My worth was no longer tied to anyone else's approval or validation. I threw myself into my work with a sense of determination I had never known before. I quickly established myself as a valuable member of the team, bringing fresh ideas, new perspectives, and a work ethic that set me apart. My confidence grew with each success, each small win. But it wasn't just about the job. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself that I had lost along the way. It was about proving to myself that I could succeed on my own, that I didn't need anyone else to make me feel whole. But success didn't just come in the form of career accomplishments. It came in the way I started to rediscover the things I loved, the things that had been buried beneath the weight of my past life. I began to paint again, something I had given up years ago in favor of supporting Ethan. I started taking long walks in the park, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the sunlight on my face. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had always supported me, who had always believed in me. I began to nurture relationships that had been neglected, realizing that these people, these connections, were the ones who truly mattered. One of the most powerful changes was the way I began to view myself. For so long, I had measured my worth by how much I could give to others. I had allowed Ethan's success to be my success, his happiness to be my happiness. But I had been wrong. I had learned that true happiness doesn't come from what we give to others. It comes from what we give to ourselves. And when I started to invest in myself, when I started to build a life that was mine and mine alone, I felt a peace I had never known. But there were still moments when the past tried to creep back into my life. Ethan would still reach out from time to time, his words more desperate with each passing day. He apologized over and over again, trying to convince me that things could be different, that he had changed. But I had learned a hard truth. People only change when they want to, and I wasn't the one who had to fix him. I wasn't the one who had to make him feel better about his mistakes. I had spent enough of my life trying to fix someone else. Now, it was time to fix myself. Each time he contacted me, I became more resolute in my decision. I didn't need his apologies. I didn't need him to validate my worth. I had already done that for myself. And each time I ignored his messages, each time I stood firm in my decision, I felt a new sense of freedom. I had finally cut the last remaining thread that had bound me to him. I wasn't going to let him pull me back into his world. I had chosen my own path, and I was never looking back. The final moment of justice came when I saw Emily again. It wasn't a confrontation, but it was a moment of clarity. She had tried to insert herself into my life again, to come to me with fake apologies, pretending that she hadn't been a part of the betrayal, pretending that we could all move forward as if nothing had happened. But I knew better now. I knew that I didn't need her approval or her forgiveness. What she had done to me didn't define me. It didn't control me. When I ran into her at a mutual friend's event, I could feel the tension in the air. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing, as though she was waiting for some kind of reaction from me. But I stood there, calm and composed, feeling more at peace with myself than I had ever felt before. "I hope you're happy," she said, almost smugly, as if she expected me to fall apart in front of her. "You've won, I get it." I smiled, but there was no malice in it. "I don't need to win. I've already won. I've already moved on." And with that, I walked away. There was no anger, no bitterness, only the realization that I was free. I was no longer tethered to the people who had hurt me. I was no longer defined by the betrayal. I was who I had always been meant to be, strong, independent, and unstoppable. The future stretched out before me, a world full of possibilities. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of failure, of rejection, of the past. I had found my own strength, my own path. I was no longer a victim of anyone's actions. I was the creator of my own destiny. And that was the greatest victory of all. It's been a few years since I made the choice to walk away from everything that had once defined me. Time has a way of dulling the sharp edges of pain, but it also has a way of highlighting the lessons that the past has to offer. And now, as I look back at everything that has happened, I realize how much I have grown. The woman I was then is not the same person I am now, and I'm proud of who I've become. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when I thought the weight of my past would crush me, when the darkness seemed like it would swallow me whole. But with every setback, with every tear, I learned to rise again. I learned that my worth was never tied to anyone else's actions. I learned that I didn't need anyone's approval, love, or validation to be whole. I learned that I was enough. I've built a life that is mine, one that I am proud of. It's not perfect, but it's real. And that's all I ever wanted. I've found a job that challenges me, that excites me, that makes me feel alive. I work with people who respect me, who value my contributions, who see me for who I am. I no longer feel like a background character in someone else's story. I am the author of my own life now, and I've written a story filled with hope, resilience, and strength. The relationships I've cultivated are built on a foundation of mutual respect and trust. I've surrounded myself with people who lift me up, who inspire me, who see the best in me and encourage me to reach for even greater heights. I've learned the importance of surrounding myself with positivity, of building a network of support that is based on love and encouragement, not obligation. And the best part? I've found peace, true peace. A peace that comes from within, from knowing that I've made the right choices, that I've chosen myself, and that I am no longer afraid of what the future holds. There are no more doubts, no more regrets, no more wondering if I could have done things differently. I've accepted the past for what it was. I've learned from it, and I've used it as fuel to create a future that is entirely my own. Ethan and Emily are no longer a part of my life. They exist only as distant memories, shadows of a time I've long left behind. Ethan still tries to reach out from time to time, but his messages no longer hold any power over me. I no longer feel the need to respond. I no longer feel the need to hear his apologies, his excuses, his explanations. The truth is, I've forgiven him. Not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Holding on to anger and resentment would only continue to tie me to a past that I had already outgrown. I'm free now, free to live my life on my own terms, without the weight of his betrayal hanging over me. I don't know where he is now, or if he's found happiness with Emily. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I've found my own happiness. I've found my own strength. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I need anyone else to complete me. I am whole. I am complete. I am enough. As for Emily, she's faded from my life just as quickly as she entered it. I no longer waste any energy thinking about her, about what she did or how she tried to take something that wasn't hers. She's no longer my concern. I've let go of the bitterness, the anger. I've let go of the need to make her understand what she did. I've let go of the need to prove anything to her. She is no longer part of my story. She was merely a lesson in my journey, one I'm grateful for, because it taught me how to stand firm in my own worth, how to value myself above all else. I've also made room for new experiences, new adventures. I've taken up things I never thought I would, like solo travel, where I've explored parts of the world I had only ever dreamed of. I've learned to enjoy my own company, to find peace in solitude, to see the world through my own eyes without feeling the need to share it with anyone. I've rediscovered my passion for art, for writing, for living a life that feels authentic to me. There's a sense of freedom in being able to chase your own dreams, to follow your heart without hesitation or fear. I've also opened myself up to love again, but this time I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I'm not looking for someone to fix me or to save me. I'm looking for someone who will walk beside me, who will respect me, who will love me for who I am. And I know that when the time comes, I'll be ready for it, because I know that I am capable of loving and being loved in a way that doesn't diminish who I am. I look at myself now and I see a woman who has fought for everything she has. I see someone who has walked through the darkest days of her life and emerged stronger on the other side. I see someone who is unstoppable. I see someone who has learned to trust herself, to believe in herself, to walk with her head held high, knowing that no matter what life throws her way, she will rise again. And I am proud of her. I am proud of the woman I have become. So, here I am, standing on the edge of the future, looking forward to everything it has to offer. The road ahead is still unknown, but for the first time in my life, I am not afraid. I'm not afraid of failure, of disappointment, of the things that might go wrong, because I know deep down that I am more than enough. I am worthy of everything I've ever wanted, and I will continue to build a life that reflects that truth. This is my story, and it's only just beginning.